Hello, welcome back to my hot kitchen. I'm Wendy, and we're here with another awesome date night dinner for you and your sweetie to enjoy together on your next date night at home. Tonight's delicious dinner is going to be a coffee rub steak with a chipotle garlic compound butter. We're also going to have mashed potatoes, stuffed mushrooms, and my take on the old classic, the shrimp Louis salad. So let's get started by marinating our steak first. Now, of course, I always start with my steak in the fridge because I like it to be nice and cold. So once I get this lid off here, take a look at these bad boys. We have a couple thin-cut ribeye steaks, and it was actually kind of a hard choice to choose between the ribeye and a beef roast for this, but I went ahead and went with the ribeye because I wanted a steak tonight. So next, let's work on creating the rub. And this is going to be a little bit different technique here because this is a coffee rub steak. So you're going to want to take about 2 tablespoons or about a shot glass's worth of dark roasted coffee beans, a 1/4 teaspoon of coriander seeds, and 2 to 3 allspice berries. Want to put it all into a nice clean coffee grinder. You just want to wipe it out with a paper towel or a piece of white bread to clean it out. Grind it up to a nice fine powder. Let's check on it and see how it's looking. I'm going to go a little finer than that, maybe like 3 or 4 more seconds. There we go. And then we're just going to dump it all over the steak. Now the coffee is an interesting flavor to work with. It adds smokiness and a complexity like no other spice in the world. And its main job here is just going to be to infuse the steak with a whole new complex flavor. The allspice and the coriander, of course, are always very nice on a steak, and even better when combined with a nice, good quality coffee. Now, if you don't have access to whole bean coffee or a grinder, just go ahead and use regular pre-ground coffee, and just make sure that you're mixing it with ground allspice and ground coriander. Use about a 1/4 teaspoon of each. So once you've finished rubbing it in, go ahead and give it a little bit of a stab. Just a little light stabbing. Helps to drive the flavor deep into the meat. And remember, like I was saying, it was kind of a tough choice to do a steak or a beef roast. So if this sounds good as a beef roast, go for it. Now it's going to add a couple ounces of red wine and a nice generous dose of Worcestershire sauce. This is going to be about a teaspoon or so. And then go ahead and flip them over, mix and combine, moisten up that coffee. You want to activate it with the acidity of the red wine, and then let them rest. I'm going to cover them up and put them back into the fridge. And now we're going to move on to the mashed potatoes that are going to stuff the mushrooms. So I have 3 small to medium-sized potatoes in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop them in a bath of hot water. I'm going to crank it up so it comes to a boil, and I'm going to add to it about a teaspoon of salt. Remember that when you are boiling potatoes, your best chance to season them is going to be in the initial boiling process. And then we're also going to add a nice amount of garlic. You can add chopped garlic or a whole clove. Either way, you want to be very generous with it. And now, with the steak marinating of the potatoes boiling, let's turn our attention to the shrimp Louis salad. So I have a heavy dozen nice large prawns here, and what we're going to do is just go ahead and put them in this pot of steaming water to cook them. They're only going to take a few minutes, so check back on them after you've made the dressing. And in order to make the dressing, I'm going to need this spatula. So over here, I've got a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise, about a 1/4 teaspoon of mustard, a 1/2 teaspoon of red hot chili sauce, about a 1/4 teaspoon of parsley, and some finely minced onion and garlic, about 2 tablespoons or so of onion and about a clove or so of garlic. And what we're going to do is start by kind of softening those up with some nice fresh squeezed lemon juice. Neither the onions nor the garlic will be cooked for this, so I like to kind of soften up the abruptness of flavor with a little bit of lemon juice. Give it a little squeeze in there and just kind of toss it around. Now, if you wanted, you could let it soak at this point for several minutes, but that's not going to be necessary really because the dressing itself is going to all soak together. So the next thing to combine in is just everything else. The chili sauce, the mustard, the parsley, and of course the mayonnaise. Now, a lot of shrimp Louis salad dressing recipes call for green bell pepper in there. I don't really care for the flavor that it adds, so I'm omitting that in my particular version. This is a very simple, straightforward kind of deal here. You're just going to mix it until it's all uniform in texture, color, and consistency. And then give it a little taste. And if you like, you can adjust it with a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm going to add a nice amount of pepper. I feel that my particular dressing is salty enough thanks to the mayonnaise. But you can almost never have enough pepper in a dressing recipe like this. So add your pepper to taste and then mix it all up. And then the dressing is done. Now this dressing is nice and light. With the lemon juice, it goes really well with the shrimp. The onions and garlic add a nice savory flavor to it. And the chili sauce adds a pleasant little spice that complements the shrimp beautifully. So let's go check on the shrimp. After just a few minutes of steaming, you can see that they've turned all bright pink and opaque. That's perfect. Now all we need to do is just pull out the steaming basket and run a little cool water over them. You just want to cool them down, and then you can peel them off if you've got the type of shrimp like I have that have shells on. So here we are peeling shrimp. Now, one of the advantages of being able to cook is that when you pick shrimp up on sale that are not easy peel, that are not deveined, is that you will know how to handle them. Now, these particular shrimp were a fantastic deal, but they aren't prepared in the way that many shrimp are. So I'm peeling them, and as I'm peeling them, I'm going through and deveining them too. Just using the tip of the knife to kind of draw out the vein after I've peeled them off by just running a cut down the back end. Once I'm satisfied that the vein is removed, I'm just going to go ahead and discard these shells. And then we're going to take the shrimp over and give them one final little rinse just to make sure all the muck's off of them. Just a quick little rinse, and then we're going to set them in the fridge to cool off. And then it's all about the potato stuffed mushrooms. So let's go ahead and take a look at those potatoes. Just want to see them yield to the gentle pressure of a fork, and yes, they do. You'll note that I had the water boiling on kind of a low boil. That's so that the pot doesn't boil over on me. So now it's time to drain them off. Of course, I have a colander here in my sink. Pour them in. Shake them off while they're hot. One of the keys to this recipe is working with the potatoes while they're still hot. You can see all the steam that's coming off of them. It's exactly what you want to see. That means that the water is coming out of them. Now the next step is to extrude them through something. You can use a food mill, a potato ricer, or you can go super low tech like I do and use a fine mesh colander. And all I'm going to do is just push these nice soft potatoes through the mesh to make them into a really, really fine, almost puffy consistency. And I'm doing it over the hot pan, though I have turned the heat off because I want to cook out all that water if I can. Another thing to note with the potatoes is that they are peeled, and that's just to enhance the nice, soft, fluffy texture. If you leave the peels on, it's not bad, but it does interfere with the softness. Now, I really like this mushroom recipe. This is actually something that my sweetie came up with. He just got a great idea one night and made it happen, and it was so tasty that we wanted to share it with you on our show. So I've got all the mushrooms pushed through there now. Now I just need to clean off the outside edge. I love the look of it on there. It's so like fluffy. It's almost beard-like in some spots. And then off the bottom too. Now, of course, there are nice tools out there, like I mentioned, that work. But I like the fine mesh colander because it's just one less piece of equipment that I have to clean up in my kitchen. So now the next step is to go ahead and add butter. I have a couple tablespoons here. We're just going to pop it in there and kind of fold it in. Get it all melty and happy and lovey-dovey. And then the next thing to do is to scrape the potatoes into a mixing bowl and give them a little beat to fluff them up. And that's a nice consistency right there. You see how well those are holding together? That's perfect. You'll note that we didn't add any milk or cream, and that's because it just loosens them up too much for this particular recipe. So we're just going to beat them for a few minutes until they seem very fluffy and light. That's beautiful right there. You can see that they almost doubled in consistency. How fun is that? Now we're going to set those aside and go work on our mushrooms. So we have 8 nice little cremini mushrooms here. And you can see that I've gone through and already scooped out most all of them. I still like to make sure that you get a chance to see everything. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I scoop out the gills. I use the back of a spoon and I just kind of, toss the stuff aside there. And then to get the stem out, you just give it a little gentle twist, pull it out, and again, just use the back of the spoon to kind of scoop the rest of it out. Now there's nothing wrong with the gills, and if you're working with extra large mushrooms, you may even want to leave them in. I am scooping them out because I want the space for the delicious potato filling. There we go, that'll do. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull that aside here. And now let's go to work seasoning up the mushrooms. Now there's several layers of flavor involved here. We have more garlic, a couple cloves worth, and we're just going to blend it into some nice soft butter. And that's going to be used to dress the mushrooms inside and out. And we'll use the spoon again. Get a little bit in there. Nice little layer of love underneath the potatoes. Plus that garlicky yumminess is going to sink into the mushroom itself and give it a nice little seasoning and help it to retain its moisture as it bakes. And then of course you're going to want to flip them over and also butter the other side. These mushrooms are almost sautéed in the oven, if you will. Sautéing because they have a nice layer of fat underneath them from this delicious, yummy butter. And there's also going to be a little bit of wine involved. It's a nice, nice recipe. And you don't have to get too fussy with the spreading of the butter because as it melts, believe me, it's going to spread everywhere. Now we just want to season them up with some salt and pepper. Be a little bit generous about it. And then flip them over and salt and pepper inside as well. And then we're going to need a couple drops of wine in each one. Just a little tiny bit. I'll pour a little into my spoon and kind of use it to sort of drizzle it in there. Using a nice red wine because it adds a nice robust flavor. There we go. And now let's bring in the mushrooms, or bring in the potatoes to stuff into the mushrooms. We gather it all in the bowl. Use my spoon and fingers to get it all to work. I'm just going to start by doing one little go around here, and then I will add volume with whatever potatoes I have left. We were testing these recipes. We tried them a few different ways. We tried them with these cremini mushrooms, and we also tried them with portobello mushrooms, and we decided that the cremini mushrooms were even better than the portobellos because the proportion of potato to mushroom is just perfect. And you can make the potatoes nice and lofty on the creminis versus the portobello where it comes out kind of flat. Still, if you wanted to do it with a portobello mushroom, you definitely could. And once all the potato has been deployed on the mushrooms, you're good to go on that particular step. Next thing to do is to bring in the baking pan and transfer the potatoes to a baking pan. And you don't really need to worry about sculpting the potatoes for this particular recipe because the heat from the oven is going to cause them to collapse a little bit anyway. So all your hard work of sculpting would just be kind of a lost cause. I'll give them a little space in there. And then I have a little bit of garlic butter left. I'm going to go ahead and scrape that out because I want all that good flavor, and I'm just going to drop it here into the pan. As it melts, it will be delicious. And then we're going to add a little red wine, up to a couple ounces, depending on the size of your pan. You want to see a nice little puddle in the bottom. And then finish with a nice little crowning of cheese. I'm using very finely grated Romano cheese. I highly recommend some sort of sharp, pungent cheese for this, something that's going to brown up nicely. Romano, Asiago, even a nice sharp cheddar would do the job beautifully. So I have my oven preset at 350 degrees, and I'm going to very carefully put the potatoes in the oven. They're a little rounded on the bottom, so they kind of wiggle a little bit. And we're going to want to bake the potatoes for about, 10 to 20 minutes. You want to keep an eye on them because at some point they will kind of start to deflate. So you want to catch them when the top just turns a little golden brown and crank the heat up to caramelize the cheese and then pull them out. And it's not that they're inedible if they collapse, they're just not as pretty. So here are the beautiful steaks, all happily marinated. Just want to give them a little flip. Marinated meat likes to be flipped. And we're going to just set them aside for a moment. I'm going to turn on my grill and get it preheating. And while that happens, I'm going to go ahead and get my compound garlic butter started. So basically, we're going to cook the garlic just a little bit to kind of soften up the pungency. I'm going to use just a couple drops of olive oil. And I have 1 to 2 cloves of garlic, all minced up nice and fine. I'm just going to drop that in the garlic, drop that in the olive oil. Give that a little swirl there, and then while that gets going, I'm going to work with my chipotle pepper. Now I like to work with chipotle peppers packed in adobo sauce. I'll buy a can and freeze them all individually since there's just 2 of us. We don't often use a full can of chipotles all at once. And what I'm doing right here is just removing the seeds and just discarding those. And I just kind of want to break up the pepper a little bit with the back of a spoon. Add a little salt to the mix to help it break down. That'll do the trick for right now. And after the garlic is cooked for about a minute, you just want to scrape it into the bowl with the chipotle pepper. And just mill the two together. You want to mill them and mash them and make them pretty much into a paste. You can always use a mortar and pestle for this job, or just the back of a spoon in a little bowl. It's quite all right for it to be a little chunky. And once you have a paste-like consistency, add in the butter. You want to work with soft butter. The heat of the garlic will help to kind of soften up the butter a little bit more. You don't want it to be melted though, because you want the hot steak to do that job for you. And then to really bring it out of its shell, you want to add a little bit of acidity to it. You can use lemon juice, lime juice. For me though, I'm going to use just a couple drops of cider vinegar. I like the cider vinegar because it's just slightly sweet and it's pretty knoll in flavor. So it just does a nice job of brightening up the butter. And that, my friends, is a nice spicy little butter that will go on top of the steaks. Now it's time to throw the steaks on the grill. Before you throw the steaks on the grill, if you like, you can scrape off the excess coffee. If you're a real fan of coffee though, don't worry about it. I like to scrape off a little bit because it is a touch on the gritty side. But then again, that's up to you and your personal preferences. Let's take a look at the potatoes now that we have the steak on the grill. Oh, don't those look nice? See how they're getting a nice little bit of browning going on? Very good, very good. Give them a little spin, rotate, and pop them back in. And now I'm going to crank the heat up to 450 degrees. And this is the point where you want to watch them very carefully. And now while that's going, it's time to assemble the salad. Now this is a pretty straightforward deal here. I'm going to toss the salad in a little bit of the dressing. Not all of it, just a little bit of it to kind of give the lettuce a nice little coating. The rest of it we're going to kind of pile on top, if you will. I'm using the nice sweet butter lettuce. Romaine lettuce or green leaf would also work well for this. Spring mix would be fine too, although I like the kind of clean simplicity of a simple green lettuce. There we go. And then we're just going to kind of pile this on the plates, dividing equally between the two. And between the salad and the mushrooms, you've got your vegetables covered for the night's dinner. Next thing to do is to layer on some cucumbers. I'm going to arrange them in a nice little circle across the top of the lettuce, kind of overlapping them to make them pretty. Like that. There we go. The cucumbers add a nice little crunch and a nice clean flavor. The key point of this salad is clean. And then the shrimp, put them right here in the center of the cucumber. It's nice when they're all chilled. Just have a better effect for a salad. You don't want to put warm food on a salad. And then a little more dressing. Kind of drizzle it on like that. Around the outside of the cucumbers. Doing it this way gives you a little visual interest. And then finally, a nice little sprinkling of sunflower seeds. You can use regular roasted, salted, whatever type of sunflower seed you like. And you want to use a couple tablespoons worth. And that's the salad. Let's give the steaks a little flip here. Wow, those smell awesome. Coffee gives it a really nice aroma. Flatten it down on the grill there. All right, now let's go deal with our potatoes. Oh, they are beautiful. Yum. Come out of the oven, give them a little chance to cool down. So we've got some nice juices rising to the top of the steaks. That's just how I like them. Usually means that they're medium rare when those juices just start to rise. So I'm going to pull each steak off the grill and just let it rest on the plate. And while it's still really hot, you want to hit it with that butter. This is a nice, sinfully delicious kind of meal here. Steak butter, oh yeah. Just let it sit there on top, melt and pool up. It'll make the shakes shiny and beautiful and awesome. And while that happens, let's just go ahead and plate these fabulous mushrooms next to the steak. Handle them gently. They will have softened up quite a bit as they baked. And there you have it. Just like that, you've whipped up an awesome dinner to share with your sweetie on your next date night at home. And this one has a little energizing kick thanks to that coffee rub. So pair this with a nice robust red wine. Think Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, or even a nice Côte de Rhône. And call in your sweetie. Sweetie! It's dinner time! Hi there, handsome dinner.
Hi.
Yummy steak, and look, your potatoes.
Yum.
Happy date night.
Love date night.
Thank you. So lucky to have such a gentleman with my sweetie.
Kitchen. This is such a hot kitchen.
So thanks for joining me in my hot kitchen tonight. Have fun turning up the heat in your kitchen, and we'll see you next week. Night night.